Hello everyone and welcome again to this Python course. Okay, so let's continue with our string study. Now we are going to study some of the methods and functions that we can call on strings. Some of them are more general functions that you can call on other objects. Some of them are related to the data type of string objects. I'll make sure that I'll point into which bucket our function and methods we are going to study fall into. Okay, it should be a pretty couple of lectures because I don't want also to cover extensively all the methods that exist out there to avoid boring you out. Just want to show you some of the cool examples of things that Python can do with strings, which are pretty cool. So let's dive right into it. Okay, I think I'm going to clean my notebook right now, so the one that we've been working on, and let me do this still here, and here I'm going for methods and functions. Okay, let's start with a sentence, an example sentence, which will be Lisbon is in Portugal. Again, sorry for my home bias here. So, first method that we can study is the len method, L-E-N. This is a more general, not really method, but a function, a general function in Python, because you can use len on several different objects. We can use len on lists, for example, as we will see. But here it works with strings and extracts the length of a certain object. Let's see what that means. So len, and we pass sentence into len, and we have 22 because that's the number of characters that exist in our sentence. Remember when we iterated through each character in our sentence, in a big sentence? We were basically iterating through every object, and each object corresponds to these 22 letters or characters that exist in this sentence. Why am I saying letters or characters? Because a space also counts as a character. Okay, so a space will increment the value that we see here. Next one, this couple of lectures will be like this. I'll be just throwing methods at you and functions for you to understand what you can do with strings, is the upper method. So I'm going to put here upper and lower, or these two at the same time. So these ones are methods. Why they are methods? Because they are called on top of the object. Notice that function, this function len, is basically a function that we can use, and we have to pass arguments inside. Now here we can access the upper via the object. We've also seen this difference before of how we can call certain types of functions by using the object dot something, dot the type or the method that we are going to use. In this case, sentence dot upper will return the sentence, but all in uppercase letters. I think this is pretty straightforward. So of course you can save the returning from this method on another variable. Again, notice the difference. With len, we are using a general function because we are using the function and passing the sentence inside, getting something in return. Here we are using a method that's specific to string objects. That's why we call this a method. So we can't use upper with any other object. I think there's no any other object that I can remember that we can use upper on, and it's tied to this str type of object. Of course, we also have the reverse, which is dot lower. Lisbon is in Portugal. In this case, everything is in lowercase. On the notebook, you will also find more conversions and another recap on conversions. I'm going to skip that one because we already spoke about it. Let me go for the isAlpha method. So the isAlpha is something that will test if our sentence is an alpha sentence. And let's see what this means. So basically, an alpha sentence is something that only contains letters. Okay, so what Python will check are other elements that are not letters, for instance, spaces, for instance, exclamation marks, as we have, numbers. All of this will be tested with this isAlpha. Notice that the method that we had before returned a string, a transformed string, and here this one returns a true or false, a Boolean element. So the fact that this can only be applied on strings is not correlated with the returning type of the method, okay? Make sure you understand that because that's pretty important. So these two methods share the same thing. They share the fact that they can be only applied to string objects, but that doesn't mean that their returning values are the same. They can be different. And in this case, they are, because the lower and upper return a string, right? This is a string. This is a string type of object. While the isAlpha returns just a true or false. It returns a Boolean value that will let us understand if there's any other character than letters in our string. For instance, if I apply this to a string without using variables, if I use Lisbon.isAlpha, What do you think this will yield? Let's see. True. I hope that by this time this code is pretty clear to you, okay, what I'm doing here and why can I use this instead of a variable. If it's not, drop me a message and we can speak a bit more about this detail because it's important. Of course, if I do Lisbon space, notice that I'm having here a blank space here on this string, and if I test it with is alpha, it's false. Also, if I use Lisbon1 dot is alpha, I have also a false because there are other elements other than strings in this character element that I have right here. And let's see another method, which is the strip. So the strip method is kind of analogous to the left and right in Excel, for example, if you work with Excel. So if I use, let me put here this, remember that, for example, Lisbon space is not equal, and as we'll see, to Lisbon without the white space. So these two have different binary representations. And when I test this, I have a false, okay? Why? Because this string, although for us humans it seems the same, it's not for the computer because of this extra white space here. There's a method in strings that will remove us the leading and trailing blanks, which is called the strip. So if I do Lisbon.strip, you'll see that in the return this blank space was removed. Now, for example, if I compare this Lisbon.strip is equal to Lisbon, I'll have a true because now I'm comparing the Lisbon.strip, which exactly removes this this trailing blank right here. Just to make sure, let's see Lisbon with leading and trailing blanks, so blank spaces on both sides. Apply strip, and as you can see, our string is now only composed of everything except the blank space. Of course, strip doesn't work with blank spaces in the middle of the characters, okay? Just works with leading and trailing blanks. First approach into string methods and how we can apply here several methods and functions on strings. Let's continue with some more on the next lecture. I'll see you there.